Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Five Heart Podcast. It's brought to you by CoreNation.com, part of the SB Nation Podcast Network. I'm your host. My name is Greg Mahachko. Joining me this week is Todd. He's a legend, and we'll let you guess where. Wolverton. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Greg. A legend in my own mind.
Okay. Well, that's not what you told me before we started recording. So all right. Nice to know that you changed the story. Noticeably absent this week, our founder and fearless leader, Johnston. And I want to tell you now, do not adjust your colors if you're watching this on YouTube on your screen. It is April. I know we look festive, very Christmassy, red and green. What can I say, Todd? I'm just holly jolly, by golly.
I tell you what, I'm not quite ready for Christmas. We had 90 degrees yesterday and snow this morning. So what the hell is that? I mean, they say, well, that's weather in Nebraska, weather in Iowa. Well,
it's not just there. It's in my portion of in Southern Illinois. It wasn't quite as drastic. We had 70s yesterday, and today we had just thunderstorms all day long. I had to postpone a couple of work appointments because I was like, you know what? And it, of course, naturally wasn't nearly as severe. And thankfully it wasn't as severe as they were predicting, because they had us in like a stage 4, storm crisis warning, with tornado warnings possible and golf ball sized hail. And I'm really glad none of that came to pass. But what it did prevent me from, doing my job. So instead I stayed home and I made dinner. My wife had picked up at the store a couple days back some sirloin steaks. So I had some time at the house earlier today. So I put those in a little homemade marinade and cooked them up. And they were so good that even the dog was trying to steal it off the table.
Oh, there you go.
So, but we love the dog. We've decided, I don't know. Did you all ever have pets in your house, Todd?
No, we did not. We were, animals belonged outside.
Okay.
And that was the philosophy that my parents had. And I guess that's kind of been reinforced with both my brother and I. But
I've always loved dogs more than cats. And look, cat lovers out there, don't come to their defense. I don't care. But I've always had an affinity for dogs. Dogs and I get along real well. But my mom developed an allergy to dogs and cats right after I was born, because they used to have a dog and then they had to get rid of it. I was like, well, it's the dog or the baby. And, I got to sleep inside. So
good for you. I'm glad they picked you over the dog.
I'm sure I was a lot cuter back then. So I always wanted a dog growing up and never had the opportunity. So when my wife and I got married, we adopted a dog. And then a couple years later, we adopted a second one. And we have decided, especially after the first one, we had to put her down a couple of years ago. When Coco goes, that's kind of going to be it for us in pets. We'll also have to pay professionals to come in and defur the house, although we vacuum regularly, but all the nooks and crannies, as it were. So Coco's been with us now since February 2011, and still pretty quick going outside chasing rabbits. So just be blessed with the dog as long as we can. So I know John's a dog lover, and I'm sure somewhere in your heart you like animals.
I like them. I sure do. I just I like dogs. I've always enjoyed playing with them. But right now in this lovely 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment that we're in, we barely have enough room for the two of us.
It's like I feel like your philosophy on dogs or cats or pets is also going to be your philosophy with future grandchildren. They're great. We love them, but it's best when they leave.
We're going to be up for that here in just a couple of months. We'll see how that all goes.
Did we know that?
Oh, I think maybe I made that announcement a while back. But yeah, my daughter Reagan is and her husband Mitch. They're expecting right around the 1st of July. So yep, that'll be a pleasant change for us. So
Hey, Todd, you know who else's birthday's right around the beginning of July?
oh, you, yeah. What day, Greg?
Well, if I'm just thinking, if they're born on the 5th, you could use a derivative of my name. Call him Greg.
There we go. I'll put in a pitch for that. Now, right. I was married on the 4th. Oh. So, that way, never forget that anniversary.
Well, then it's a toss-up. It's what is more important, my anniversary or the anniversary, the birth of our nation?
There you go.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. But always celebrate them either way.
So. There you go. Hey, when you have cold beers and burgers or steaks or pork steaks, it's a tremendous outing regardless. Todd, before we get going, I'd like to open this show the way all Five Heart podcasts should be recorded and most likely enjoyed, and that's slightly inebriated. And I'm drinking a local brewer, so local that he doesn't really have a distributor, but he does make a fine beer. I don't know how he gets away with the name, and I'm hoping that raising the awareness of his brew doesn't get him in trouble. It is Jedi Brew Co. in Breeze, Illinois, and this is a delicious pint of his Atomic Wit, Belgian-style wit beer, 4.9% alcohol by volume. Todd, I got this for free, and I told him, I said, I'm stealing from you. I should be paying you for this beer. So well, next ones I probably will have to pay for.
When I get to Illinois, we'll have to give that a try. Sounds good. I had a little gin and tonic earlier this evening. Right now, drinking a little water. I kind of like to have a little balance. I'm up there in years a bit, and I don't like hangovers. I don't like any semblance of hangovers. So big gin and tonic. It's time for me to level off a little bit for the evening.
It's important and to stay hydrated. You got to replenish I recently watched. Did you ever watch Blue Mountain State?
Yes.
Okay, so you know about the oil change.
A little familiar with it. My memory, I'm not a detail. I don't remember some of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm a little familiar with that.
I highly recommend to anybody who, especially if you like this show, a little bit of that sophomoric humor, a little college football, very little college football thrown in. You'll enjoy Blue Mountain State. I came upon it very late. I only started watching it a few months ago. Became a big fan right away. So you can watch all 3 seasons on Amazon Prime Video through the free IMDb TV app. So there are commercials, but they're brief commercials, and so we hope you enjoy Blue Mountain State. And that's all our commercials. I think that's all the plugs we got to do this week, Todd.
Get them out right up front.
You're right. There were some festivities in the old Lincoln this past weekend, were there not?
Yeah, there were. Well, our good old buddy John drove down to my place on God, what the hell was it? Thursday, I guess. Thursday night. And we definitely discovered that the 2-bedroom apartment is built for 2 people. But no, I'm just teasing. John's a great house guest, and it was good to have him here. And he spent a good chunk of his time on Friday making some contacts and talking to some people down there. Relative to Nebraska athletics and that type of thing. I'm not going to go into that. That's his story for another time. But then we got together on Saturday and met by the statue. You always have those meeting points. And at Memorial Stadium, you got, if you say we're going to meet by the statue, you got to define which one.
Right.
So we met by the, I call it the lineman statue on the east side of the stadium. And that's where we met. And we went to the spring game together. And John had spent quite a bit of time there. He got there earlier than me and was chatting up folks. And trying to get a pulse on the state of, well, Corn Nation. And, but anyway, we went to the game and had some nice seats, and we enjoyed ourselves being out there in the nice sunshine. I left at the end of the third quarter. John stuck it out because I decided that I wanted to see the first pitch at the baseball game. And so I walked across and watched the baseball game, and then John came in and got there, probably in about the second or third inning. But so we took time out for the spring game. We took time out for the baseball game, and then we actually went out for dinner with one of our baseball writers, Aaron, otherwise known as Brutus, Aaron and his wife and his little guy. And we had a good time in Lincoln. So nice weekend and great weather for the time that we were there.
Well, that's tremendous. All right. I gave you a heads up about this before we started rolling sound. This has been a week of deep confessions that in the grand scheme of things mean nothing for me. But I wanted to say, I knew, so my family got together for a little Easter get together on Saturday. And then my wife's sister, were having a surprise bridal shower for her almost immediately after. So I had the DVR set to record the spring game. And the thing is, outside of Nebraska athletics, I never really watched a lot of TV. It was always, watching a streaming service through my PlayStation. Right before Christmas, my PlayStation kind of went to hell. So I got a Roku, and I've been watching, some basketball, some Husker wrestling, things like that, through my Roku, through my cable provider. It's very convoluted and probably more expensive than it needs to be. What that means is that for more than 3 months, I haven't really been able to locate my TV, my cable box remote. And so I haven't been able to yet, as we record this Wednesday night, I haven't found it and haven't been able to access my DVR recording. So all I know about the annual red-white game is that Nebraska won. However, I also know Nebraska lost. So I'm hoping you're able to provide some insight as to some of your observations, what you saw, and hopefully, I know it's Holy Week, Todd. So we're not going to pile on Scott Frost this week.
No, I don't. We don't need to pile on him. That's. I can accomplish that goal.
Okay,
it was actually. I was fairly convinced it was the first spring game I've ever attended. I had not remembered, and John had told me on Thursday night. He says, "No, we went once when we were in college." Yeah, we did. Well, then he must have, some of that brain injury, that fog. I think sometimes that kind of clears, and he has these epiphanies. Because on Saturday he says, "Yep, it was 1983, and we had all gone out, and we all got drunk early that day, and we stumbled in and was like, oh, what's going on here? Oh, a football game, So he was strongly of the opinion that we were there in 1983. But,
catch more of John and his trauma with his new book coming out soon, "Manage Your Damage." Yep. Free plug for John.
There you go. But anyway, here's what it came down to. We have to remember that all the spring game really is a glorified scrimmage in front of fans. And, the more I got to think about it, I think it's almost become kind of one of those annual rites. And what I've observed is that it's a time for families, that are, diehard Huskers, to gather in Lincoln and go to a game on a nice spring day. Hopefully the weather's nice, and it was this year. But oftentimes, what I saw was tons of little kids. And in the regular season, the majority of us are not going to spend $90, $95 for a ticket for a 5-year-old. It's just not going to happen. And, so there are a lot of young families there. There were a lot of multi-generational families there taking in the game. So, it's kind of a festive atmosphere, and you see these wide-eyed kids and a lot of people taking pictures. And so anybody that wants, I guess my opinion is anybody that wants to draw conclusions about the state of Nebraska football during this 2 to 3 hours, you need to figure out another way to gather information. What did we see? We saw, the starting offense as it is at this point in time out on the field for basically 3 series of play. And Scott Frost, I think he was even quoted talking about how boring and how vanilla the offense was. And it really was. They ran the ball quite a bit, but it was for the most part 2-hand touch in the first half. There were some pass plays that really weren't allowed to develop that much because, again, if a rusher got in and slapped his hand on the quarterback, they called him down. And, so you couldn't glean anything about the new Whipple offense or really gain an appreciation of, some of the new faces that have come in. I guess, in terms of kind of the top end or the top line units, it looks like the transfer that Nebraska got in from, I think down in New Mexico, Grant is number 23. God, I'm horrible with names and I should do better with this. Anthony Grant, maybe. I think he's going to be solid. He's, I read in the paper, that somebody compared him to Dedrick Mills. I don't know if he reminded me of Dedrick Mills, but he's got some good lateral moves, and I think he's pretty tough. He's not as big as what I thought he was going to be. I guess when I'd read some of the hype about him, I figured he was going to be a bigger back. He's not. But I think he's probably one of these guys that's pretty durable. Bigger than Ramir Johnston, not as big as Jacques Yount. And, that's a pretty big, those are two, polar opposites, but I think he's got some potential. There's some speed at the wideouts. Trey Palmer can flat fly. I mean, that guy is fast. And, it's going to be interesting when they figure out, what kind of sets they're going to run and what kind of personnel they're going to have on the field at the same time. Oliver Martin, I've been impressed with him since he came to Nebraska. He got open and made some catches, and I think he's got a lot of talent. And we did see, and again, I'm not going to be able to tell you his name, and I apologize for that. But the wide receiver that came through the portal from, again, I think New Mexico. It's not. I'm thinking baseball. Anyway, he's going to be a good player too. He's got nice sticky hands. So, it was, the second half, they did tackle him to the ground. We did see a bit of Chubba Purdy in the first half. He was very limited. I think he's had some injuries, only practiced for 3 days. I think Chubb is a little quicker than what maybe we've been led to believe. And I think Logan Smothers, he wasn't given much of an opportunity to show what he's got. But again, the offense was so limited that it's really hard to draw any conclusions.
How much of that how much that vanilla kind of approach to the spring game is based on the fact that it's nationally televised? That, I mean, granted, someone can theoretically drive over from Iowa City or drive down from Minneapolis or, from Madison or Columbus, but that requires effort and cash, where somebody just hitting record on their DVR and being able to find their remote can watch it, and, glean a few things. If it wasn't televised, do you think that looks any different? And this is going to sound like very blasphemous, but is the spring game necessary?
Well,
and that's saying I'm not like dogging on. I enjoy watching the spring for all the reasons that you mentioned at the top of, it. If, like right now I've got a family of 5 and I don't know if the good Lord's going to, cut me off there, if he's going to bless me more. Taking a family of 5 to Memorial Stadium in September, or October looks a lot different and feels a lot different to the old pocketbook than taking a family of 5 to the spring game. For example, our beloved fallen comrade, Brian Toll, I know that his wife took their daughter to her first game at Memorial Stadium, and it was a spring game, and she had a blast. It was so fun watching the pictures, and hoping that continues to fuel that fire that she probably picked up a little bit genetically from her dad and her mom, who's also a Nebraska native. So things like that, it's getting the kids excited, and that's how Nebraska fandom has not waned, because events like this, like the fan day, are as you said, Todd, they're multi-generational. But so I don't want the spring game to go away. But going back to my question is, A, is it necessary? And 2, does the concept of it look any different if it's not televised, and if it's all right, closed house, this is just for the folks in the stadium, you know what I mean?
Well, here's what I would say in this day and age, whether you televise it or not, a lot of what happens on the field is going to be on video somewhere, and with the stakes as high as they are in college football. And, with what some people would say, some pundits out there would say is such a fine line between winning and losing. I'm going to guess that there were personnel from Northwestern University there. And I'm going to guess that they were credentialed or in whatever way, shape, or form. In fact, I don't think that they didn't buy a ticket to sneak in the stadium and wear Husker red to be incognito. My guess is that they were very much, my guess is they were present and they were there to scout. And likewise, I would suspect that whatever Northwestern does for a spring event, if it's open to the public, my guess is that there will be some representation from Nebraska there as well. So I guess, whether it's televised or not,
doesn't really change anything.
Yeah, I don't think it really changes what you do. And, I think that, coaches at that level, they're also paranoid as hell. And, they don't want Tom Chattel or Sipple or McGowan or any of those guys writing things in their columns, that might allude to some of the things. I don't want them giving away anything. So
sure.
That'd be my guess. Is it necessary? I think it is, simply because that's how you develop and expand the fan base. Because again, I think a lot of us take it for granted about how popular Nebraska football is, because in our generation, they were on top of the world. They were winning, and they didn't have to go, to put forth any extra effort to, develop a fan base. I mean, people love winners. They love to follow winners, and they'll jump on that bandwagon all the time. But, if you're going to sustain it, the future generation, the future season ticket holders, they were in attendance on Saturday. Right. That's who was there. And, I just living in Iowa, I know that at one point in time, the Iowa Hawkeyes, they played their quote unquote spring game at Valley Stadium in Des Moines. They took it on the road. But they also don't have, 50, 52, 54,000 people show up for a spring game. I remember way, way, way back. I mean, I'm really dating myself here, but when Jim Walden was the coach at Iowa State, and was running the triple option back at Nebraska fans. When I say Marv Seiler, they'll know what era I'm talking about. Marvelous Marv. But Walden hated spring. He hated spring practice. He hated spring football, and that's probably why Iowa State didn't win very many damn games. They didn't take advantage of the opportunity, to develop. And so, who's to say? But football's too big to take on the road. I think it's really cool what volleyball does. They're going to play a game out in Grand Island, I think, this time, or maybe they're going further west. I know they've played out in Lexington. I know that they've played maybe out in Kearney and other places. They kind of play a spring event out there, to showcase the program in the western part of the state. Football, you can't do that, but
right.
It'd be cool if they could, So
I mean, even if you went, no, the problem is, to your point, Nebraska draws too big of a crowd to take it on the road. There are no other facilities in the state.
Right.
And so, which brings up 2 points. 54,000 was the rough estimate attendance for this year's spring game. That's certainly down. I know from what I do, as a job and things like that, there's a lot going on right now as we're kind of exiting out of the pandemic, at least, theoretically, that there are a lot of organizations, a lot of groups, a lot of churches, things like that are having events now that they can have events again. So people probably feel obligated to some of those things. Do you see the 54,000 in attendance, which I believe is down from other years? I mean, they've had over 70,000 in for, to go back to Scott Frost's first spring game, there were probably touching capacity.
Yeah.
Do you see that as an indictment on the Frost era? Well, and before you answer that question, you mentioned Jim Walden, and I was trying to Google some of the years he was like, I don't want to date myself, Jim Walden reference, Iowa State. But I did a quick search for Jim Walden. One of the first pictures that popped up was Jim Walden shaking hands with Tom Osborne. So I just wanted to share that part. Now back to my question.
Well, they were on the same coaching staff together.
Not this one. This one's Iowa State and Nebraska.
Well, they were, because Jim Walden was an assistant at Nebraska at one time.
Okay. I'm just saying the picture that I have.
Well, no, here's, John and I talked a little bit about this, and, is it an indictment? I don't think so. I mean, I guess I prefer to look at it the other way. When Scott Frost, came in, that level of excitement, that level of anticipation, all the optimism, every red wearing Nebraska fan, at the first opportunity, they were so damn much excitement. They wanted to, the spring game, if Scott Frost had said, we're going to play 10 minutes with a running clock, that's going to be the spring game this year.
It still would have sold out.
Yeah. They still would have. Yeah. People wanted to latch onto that so bad. And, understand it's been 4 years of disappointment. We all recognize that. So I guess I'd kind of like to think, in fact, in terms of the fact that there's still 54,000 people that are willing to come and watch this football team play, in light of the fact that they haven't had a winning season for 5 or 6 years. No one else does that. That speaks more to the commitment of the Nebraska football fan than it does anything else, in my opinion.
Two things about that I wanted to mention. When Scott Frost was first announced right here on the Five Heart podcast, it was Haas Reuter and I at the time, and we were making plans for, I believe, New Orleans, for 2022, or like 4 years from now, he's going to have us to the national championship game, and I'll see you there, man. Clearly, it has not gone that way. But I remember, and a lot of, I can't even say younger people, but, a lot of people who remember the NCAA football games for like Xbox and PlayStation, things like that. when you were in your dynasty mode, you had to recruit high school players to your school. And one of the I guess the pedestals that you could stand on about your school was your fan base and fan loyalty and things like that. And it's no surprise that, and I know you and John talked about that video last week, talking about, if you're making your ultimate, college football program or something, what do you want? You want Nebraska fan base, because to a fault, we're a pretty loyal bunch. We all want the same destination. We have different routes on the map to take to the destination. I think sometimes we can be divisive as hell, and there's more infighting than I would like to see. But at the end of the day, when it's a college football Saturday, we're showing up, and it doesn't matter if it's in October, November, or April. 54,000 for a team that hasn't had a winning record and hasn't been to a bowl game since the year my son was born. 2015 was the last time we were to a bowl game, and that's a long time ago.
Well, we even remarked, we went, obviously, we went to the baseball game. I can't remember what time the game got over, but, that ended up being a frustrating endeavor as well. But, we went up into the Haymarket for, to grab a meal. And I was really shocked. Again, I hadn't been to spring games before. But
that you could remember.
But I was absolutely shocked how many people stuck around town, as if it were, a regular, Saturday in the fall, because, the place was packed. Of course, it was also nice, and the college kids were out too. So, but yeah, it was enjoyable. It's not something that, I don't know, maybe when I have a grandchild, maybe I will have to give my grandchild their first Nebraska football experience at a spring game or something like that.
Little Greggy.
Well, we do know it is a girl, so I don't think she'll be Greggy, but
growing up, I heard a lot of variations, so I'm just a creative duo could make it happen.
There you go.
To put our button or close the book. So how do we say on the red white game? The white defeats the Reds 43-39. I think this is just me talking. Views and opinions expressed are solely those of Greg Mahachko, do not necessarily represent the 5 Heart Podcast, Coordination.com, Vox Media, or any of its subsidiaries. I would love for the coaches to just separate and draft 2 teams and have it be a scrimmage. You can modify the contact if you want. Certainly, the quarterbacks don't need to be taking hits in the spring, but I don't want let's all stand here on the field. I want it to look more like football, and I want you to still give everybody the opportunities. I'm not saying, put one up to push another one down, but I would like to see that type of format, and unfortunately, that's not the kind of spring game we get. But nobody's asking my opinion. Scott, if you're listening, I'll get you them digits, baby. So let's talk about baseball, because they had a hell of a weekend. Wow.
Well, I don't know that the mayor of Lincoln or the president of the university has offered an official proclamation, but John Johnston will not be allowed in the city of Lincoln anywhere in the future when Rutgers baseball comes to town. I mean, they may expand that ban a little bit further, but I can say for absolute certainty that there were some common themes between this year and a year ago, but Johnston was in town and they got swept by Rutgers last year, and they got swept by Rutgers in an ugly, ugly, ugly fashion this year. So
I can I ask a question, a ridiculous question? We are supposed to care about these student athletes, right? And we want to look out for their best interests. Softball has a run rule. Why are they still trotting them out there in the seventh inning when it's 19-1?
Well, when the seventh inning started, it was 3-1.
That's a fair point. Great comeback.
It was when the seventh inning started.
Oh, that makes it so much worse.
And Martin went out to the mound. I was still optimistic that they might be able to pull this game out. But then again, I had to look at it through clear lenses instead of my rose-colored ones, and realize that up to that point, Nebraska only had 2 hits. You're not going to win many games with 2 hits, and I don't care if the score is 3-1 or 19-1.
Offense has been the problem, or at least been a problem. I mean, they've had plenty of problems when you get housed at your house. Wow. Here's,
what was so frustrating about the whole thing to me, and I don't think I'm the only one of this opinion, is that 1 week earlier, they had put things together out at Ohio State, and they basically fired on all cylinders. It's easy to argue that Ohio State gave them the game on Friday night because I think the Buckeyes had, like 5 or 6 errors, some god awful number. But Nebraska swept the series on the road. But then, they didn't play well against UNO, particularly the fact that they left bases loaded in the 9th inning with a chance to win, and they couldn't score a flip and run. And, same thing happens against Rutgers, on Friday and Saturday. On Friday and Saturday, they had runners on base in their last at bat down by 1 run and 1 or 2 runs, and they could not get the hit, to either send the game into extra innings or tie it up. The hitting has been so inconsistent. And from my perspective, if you would have told me that the hitting would have been this bad this year, I would have said, there's no way. They got to be better than that. But, Greg, the only hitters that they're putting out there that have an average above, at 300 or better are those that haven't had very many at bats. And, it's just horrible. Throw in the fact that the pitching has been inconsistent. They've made more errors this year on defense. They've had to have made more errors already at this point in the season. They're about halfway through. More errors now than they made the entire year last year. So they're really not playing well in any aspect of the game. And they're not good enough in any one of those aspects to cover up for those weaknesses.
Definitely not good enough to overcome the errors and the mistakes, the mental errors, the physical errors.
Yeah.
Last year we had a bonus, right? We had that COVID year, we had the super seniors and things like that. And by and large, we don't really have that anymore. I'm not using that as an excuse, but I'm trying to think how I want to word this question. Why was there such a steep drop off? Is it, do we need to just admit to ourselves that, last year was a great year with a lot of great guys who were playing a year extra, and this is honestly more of a rebuilding year? We have talent. We just have to get them mature enough and ready to play NCAA baseball.
I agree 100%.
Okay.
And, John has mentioned, and I think John has something to this too, that, the whole fact that the Big Ten didn't play non-conference games, stymied some player development. Well, that's
affect Rutgers apparently. Geez.
Yeah, that's across the board. But the teams, in my opinion, at least the ones I've seen, and I have not dug in. I usually don't until another 2 or 3 weeks where I really start digging in and paying attention to the rest of the conference. The two teams that are playing really well, in my opinion, at this point, are Rutgers and Michigan, and that is in large part because they're veteran teams. Rutgers has a bunch of upperclassmen playing that have been under the gun. They've brought in some transfers through the portal that are older players. You put Nebraska out there, and regardless of what anybody can say, counting on Kyle Perry and Jake Buns to be in the starting rotation, that was very, very important. And those are two of the more veteran pitchers. Right now they're down to Shea Shanneman, who I think he would have been one of the weekend starters, but they've had so many struggles, finding the right kind of pitching on the weekends. But more importantly, there have been games, Greg, where they have had 4, even 5 freshmen in the lineup. And baseball is no different than any other sport, unless we're talking about Michigan Fab Five back in whenever.
Right.
It's going to be hard to compete when you're playing a lot of freshmen.
When you've got 19-year-olds going up against 22-year-olds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
And, it's some of the other thing is that you're looking for leadership. And I understand, you got Griffin Everett behind the plate. He's an upperclassman and he's one of the captains, but this is only his second year in the program. But Bryce Matthews, he's a sophomore. Max Anderson, he's a sophomore. Both of them had really good freshman years, but they're proven that there might be something to that adage about the sophomore slump. They've really struggled this year.
Do you think that the kind of the teams you mentioned, the veteran-led teams like the Michigans and the Rutgers, are going to be in a spot like Nebraska, where Nebraska is now a year from now? When all their veterans move on, that they'll be in maybe. I mean, this is a severe drop off from what we anticipated coming into the season. Maybe we didn't. Maybe getting those rose-colored glasses that we like, or excuse me, I'm sorry, those scarlet-colored glasses. But I feel like maybe if it's not this year, it might not be next year, but 2 years from now, the world's your oyster, for Nebraska baseball, when the 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds, and they have really 2 solid years of college baseball experience because they've been relied on so heavily here as freshmen.
I have no doubt. I think that there's better years in front of them. I always marvel at people that, at the college level that can spot talent that, I've sat by professional baseball scouts, occasionally, 2 or 3 times in my life. And, I've tried to pick their brains without being overbearing, and just kind of, what is it that you're looking for and all that kind of stuff. And, some people just have a much better insight, than others. But that all being said, there are some kids on this team that I think are going to be very, very good baseball players. Core Jackson, the kid from Canada. I think he's got a great future in front of him. There's this Swanson kid that, I don't think he's played an inning out in the field, but he's pinch hit, a number of times. He's from Johnston, Iowa. My goodness gracious, that kid can hit the baseball. I mean, he's, they talk about how some of the players have had difficulty barreling up. Not him. Every time he's had an opportunity, he's put the bat on the ball, and I think he's got some good days in front of him. Garrett Anglem, has been starting. He's a second-year freshman. I guess he's not a new freshman. He redshirted last year, but he's playing out in right field. And I think that he is going to be a really good player. So there, those are just a couple, three of the new faces. I love, the Chandler Benson, the left-handed pitcher from Texas. And Emmett Olson, who's a sophomore, another left-hander. I think the potential's there to have some really good players moving forward in the future. But I think what's going to happen, and it's a reality for all sports right now in Division I, is they're going to have to pull some people out of the portal to that can start on the mound on weekends.
Media contributors.
Yes, they're going to have to. And, they got the McCarville from Grand Canyon University. He's the Sunday starter, but, he's struggled at times because I don't know. I mean, I think they've got a lot of really good young arms, but who knows if any of those can turn into starting pitchers for next year. I think one of the most physically gifted players I've seen is this Drew Christo from Elkhorn, and he just got shelled. He got 2 outs and he got shelled in the 9th inning. And I mean, he got beat up against, I think he started against Omaha. And I feel for the kid because, he wouldn't be the high level recruit that he was, and he wouldn't have been attractive to major league teams, if he didn't have a tremendous amount of potential. But right. I got to believe mentally that kid right now, he's taken a bigger beating, I think, mentally than he has physically. And so they got to figure out a way to support that kid, because you look at him, he's an imposing figure out on the mound. And I think he's got good days in front of him, but you got to feel for him right now.
Well, what is up next for the old ball team?
They're playing 4 games against BYU this week.
That's right. BYU with the kind of sudden resignation of their coach.
Yeah. Pitching, it's going to come down to pitching. And I heard Coach Bolt on the nightly news show, or Sports Nightly. He's concerned about his pitching depth because the fact that the game against Creighton got rained out, in essence, they got 3 innings, and that may have helped Nebraska for the upcoming 4 games against BYU. That's coming up. You mentioned earlier, you mentioned softball. I went and watched Nebraska play Iowa. In these gale force winds, Nebraska's softball team is on top of the Big Ten Conference by a half a game.
They're playing excellent. They're 30-9, undefeated in the conference. I almost hate to say it because I feel like I'm going to jinx it, but they're winners of their last 15.
Yeah.
Think about that.
They play 3 games at home against Minnesota. Minnesota's kind of, in the conference standings, they're about in the middle, but Minnesota has had very good softball the last 5 or 6 years. Now they've graduated their All-American pitcher and graduated some other really good players, but, they've played in regionals in recent years. So, I'll tell you what, if I wish that the weather was going to be a little bit warmer this weekend, but folks, there's going to be a lot of good ball down there in Haymarket, at Bowling Stadium, and as well as Haymarket Park. Get out and support those teams. But the women's softball team, they took 2 games from Michigan, opening the Big Ten Conference on Michigan's home field. Michigan at the time was ranked 19th. Now, correct. The softball team. Yeah, the softball team is not currently ranked. There are 2 teams ranked in the more popular poll. Northwestern is ranked 10th. They're a half a game behind, in essence, now kind of half a game behind Nebraska. And Michigan is still ranked 22nd, even though they're 4 and 5 in the conference. So
I think what hurt the ladies was that game against Stanford being canceled. back in the end of March, because it's a one game non-conference matchup. It was going to be in Lincoln. I'm sure it was due to inclement weather, but Stanford was ranked number 25 at the time. So it gives voters an opportunity to see what Nebraska can do outside of the conference against quality competition. But you're right, 3 at home against Minnesota, of course, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then next week it's on the road at Wisconsin, and they're on the road at Ohio State, finishing up the regular season at the beginning of first full weekend of May. And that will be at home against Indiana. So surprisingly, the season's winding down for them. And you look at I'm just kind of looking at their schedule, and the Big Ten teams they are not playing. There's no Illinois on there. There's no
third in the conference right now.
There's no Northwestern, like you mentioned, being number 2. So Nebraska has to keep on a roll. Certainly, we're a month away. We're a month away from the Big Ten softball tournament, but they need to stay on a roll. They need to keep building momentum because they haven't seen the teams that are nipping right at their heels.
Right.
So you hope that they're not buoying their resume with subpar competition. You know what I mean?
Well, I looked at one of those forecasts, bracketology, and for the softball tournament today. And right now they've got 5 Big Ten teams making the field, Nebraska being one of them. They have Northwestern hosting a regional, but the other 4 on the road. And it'll be interesting. As I wrote an article, I don't know when it's going to appear on Corn Nation, hopefully, tomorrow or by the end of the week, about softball. And in my opinion, they got to keep winning the series. If they go 2-1, every weekend going forward, home and away, if they at least do that, I think that's going to position themselves very well, to get a regional bid and to be up there, in the conference rankings. Now, in softball, pitching is so incredibly important. Nebraska's pitching isn't as strong as other teams in the conference, but thus far they've been able to make up for it with just incredible offense.
They've been killing it.
Yeah, they really have. They really have.
So you ladies of the Nebraska softball team, we're proud of you. So other than that, Todrick, football, baseball, softball, we've touched a little bit about, volleyball and how they take some time and go around the state. But I don't know if we have any more really to get into this week.
Well, we've talked about all I've paid any attention to.
And that's good, because that means that one of us paid attention to something, and we got some thoughts out. So you need another gin and tonic. You deserve it for all the hard work and effort that you've put into this week's episode. I didn't do much, and everybody watching on YouTube or everybody listening to this is saying thank you that I didn't contribute much. I didn't have a whole lot to say this week, but so hopefully, folks, we hope that you enjoyed this show, and we miss John too, but even our founder and fearless leader needs a little time off. And he said, to quote my mom when I was 8 years old, she's like, "I'm too poop to poop." And that's where old Papa John is. So we miss him, but we know he'll be back. And if you missed him as well, if you haven't checked out the old YouTube page, go onto YouTube. You can get some of his thoughts from Lincoln from this past weekend in the spring game. So one of his reaction videos. So for Todd Wolverton, I'm Greg Mahochko, part of Corn Nation, the 5 Heart Podcast, where we remind you this week and every week that 5 Heart is all the heart you need. Todd?
Go Big Red.